how's everyone doing? I'm Bill Eberline. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a fossil diver from Savannah, Georgia, but I'm originally from Erie, and so I come home 3 or 4 times a year to see my family and friends. And Sherry asked me to talk a little bit about what I do, and that's diving in the Savannah area and also in Wilmington, North Carolina, for Megalodon shark teeth. And this is kind of informal. I have a little video, or not a video, but a PowerPoint. But if you have questions along the way, just kind of ask them, or you can wait till the end and I'll do question and answer. I also have a lot of fossils up here that I can show you a little more afterwards. I'm happy to answer questions and talk a little bit more about what I have here. But I am mainly here to talk about searching for Megalodon teeth or Megateeth. Let's see. Now this isn't going to work. Look at that. There we go. All right, and my wife's usually here with me, so that's why it says thanks for inviting us. The great white shark is one of the most feared predators today. Everyone hears about great whites. Fewer and fewer people. How many people have seen Jaws? Most people have seen Jaws, but not everyone. It used to be everyone saw Jaws. Now just most people have seen Jaws. But the great white, we all think about it every time we go into the ocean. You think about the great whites, and it is the most feared predator today. And this is a picture of a great white tooth. This is much bigger than a great white tooth normally would be. Normally a great white tooth from a shark like Jaws would get about that big. And this is a picture of that great white. It would be about 2 inches long. And that's a great white sitting on a Megalodon tooth. So millions of years ago, scientists say millions of years ago, there was a giant shark that lived called the Megalodon. They say it got to be about 10 times more massive than a great white today. So a normal great white today might weigh 1 to 2 tons. These could go up to 15 tons. But all that remains of the great white today are the shark teeth. One of the most common questions people ask me, I find these Megalodon shark teeth, and they say, well, what about the rest of the shark? What about the vertebrae and the ribs and the jaw? And sharks are made of cartilage, and the cartilage didn't fossilize really well. So when I find the shark teeth, I find a lot of bones, but these bones are from whales or other animals that lived in that area at the time. So it could be a lot of different creatures, but I don't find, you don't find skeletal remains of the Megalodon, just the teeth. So we're lucky to even have those. A little bit about myself. I started diving in '86 in Erie, Pennsylvania. Actually, Rich and George were 2 of my instructors back then. So, they obviously helped me to really be passionate about diving. I was a member of the Sheriff's Search and Rescue Team for 15 years. We would dive locally when there was someone would steal a car and drive it in the water, or throw a gun in the water, or every once in a while, if there was a drowning, we would have to go and do a recovery there. But in 1999, I moved to Savannah, Georgia, and the main reason I moved there is because it was warmer and I wanted to use my boat more, and because I got a job at Gulfstream Aerospace. I used to be an accountant, and I was in IT, and so I got a job at Gulfstream Aerospace in their IT department, and the main reason I took that job, though, was to be in a warmer climate. When I got down there, I thought I was going to be diving on shipwrecks, because that's what we did here in Lake Erie, or if we'd go down to North Carolina and dive the Outer Banks, we always dove shipwrecks. So I thought, we're going to dive shipwrecks. And I happened to meet a guy at Gulfstream that dove. And the first thing I asked him was, you dive shipwrecks? And he said, no, we go in the rivers and dive for shark teeth. And I remember thinking, well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Who'd want to dive for shark teeth in rivers? And I was thinking little tiny shark teeth. And the next day he brought one in, and it was kind of like this. And I'm like, wow, I just want to find one of those. So this guy worked for a charter company out of Hilton Head. I went the next weekend. I did a charter. Found a bunch of these teeth, and I was just hooked. I was obsessed with it, and that's all I wanted to do was dive for shark teeth. And so that's all I started doing on all my time off. And that was back in '99. And what I would do is I'd find these teeth, and I'd put them in, I had pizza boxes, and I'd put them in pizza boxes and put the box under my bed. And I kept putting more and more boxes of shark teeth under my bed. And one day I went to put a box under the bed, and no more boxes would fit under the bed. And I thought, geez, I had to try to sell some of these. Hey, come on in. Just have a seat wherever. So one day I decided, hey, I need to do something with some of these shark teeth, and a lot of them were common, and I had I'd have multiple teeth that all looked the same, and I really didn't pay a lot of attention to them. And I thought, well, I can sell some of these and buy a boat. So I decided to sell a few and make boat payments, and it just all took off from there to where a year later I was selling more teeth than I was working, or making, doing as well selling teeth as I was working. This is a picture of a reproduction of a Megalodon jaw. This is how big they think it would have been, and you can see, you can kind of walk through it. I always say that if they were alive today, we'd just be a little snack for the Megalodon. Like you might be like a French fry to the Megalodon. I would be like a biscuit, but we'd just be a snack. We would just have been more than a snack to the Megalodon. And like I said, because the shark was made of cartilage, those jaws didn't fossilize. So this is a fiberglass cast of what they think it would have been like. And they use the size of the teeth, and they compare it to like the size of the great white, and they look at a great white jaw and they say, okay, if this is similar to a great white, that would have been about how big the jaw was. And you can see, you could just walk right through it. So these things would have been massive. You can think of it that have been the size of a large whale. So you think of the largest whales out there, but they would have 200 giant teeth in their mouth. So fortunately, they're extinct. Every once in a while, people go, oh, I wish they were still around. And I say, oh, not me. I'm diving in the water with them. This is a high-tech, digital graphics of what a Megalodon would be like if they were around today. They'd be attacking our boats. High-tech stuff here. A little bit about the time period. Scientists say these Megalodons lived from about 2 to 5 million years ago. There's a lot of variations of what different scientists think. Some of them think older, some people think a lot younger, but most scientists agree 2 to 5 million years. Back then, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, it was all underwater. And so one of the questions people ask, I always dive the rivers in Savannah for shark teeth. That's where I find most of my teeth, is in the rivers. And they say, well, why would a Megalodon swim up a river? And the answer is they wouldn't. 20 miles of what's now land was ocean. So where I live and where everyone in Georgia lives, or in coastal Georgia lives, it was all ocean, and that's why we find the fossils. The only thing is the fossils are 40 feet down below sea level, and so you can't just dig a hole in your backyard that's 40 feet deep, but the rivers and the intercoastal waterway are constantly digging holes, and you get eddies, or you get two rivers that come together and you get these swirling currents, and they dig down 40 feet. So you find a spot in a river that's 40 feet deep, and I'll dive down and see if I find any fossils. And when I get down there, what you see, or you don't really see anything, it's all muddy, but what you have is you have these fossil beds, and there's thousands and thousands of fossils. And there'll be rib bones, there'll be vertebrae, pieces of whale jawbone. Most of them are whale and other sea creature fossils, but there are some other types of bones down there. But there's all these bones down there, and you're digging through these bones, and mixed in with the bones are the shark teeth. And they're all fossilized. They're all from millions of years ago. Okay, so there's kind of two parts to this. Diving for Megalodon teeth in Savannah, and then I'll talk a little bit about North Carolina, because it's a lot different in North Carolina. This is something I did for divers recently at a dive shop, and so they wanted to know what's it like to dive in Georgia and South Carolina in the rivers, and what's it like to dive offshore. So in diving for shark teeth in, diving for shark teeth in Savannah, you're in rivers, and it's real murky water. You have to feel your way through. There's no visibility at all, so you're digging and digging with no visibility, and you find these fossils and these shark teeth mixed in with the other fossils. But there's no visibility, or I might get a few inches with the dive light, a very bright dive light, but most of all, it's all by feel. So I'm digging around the mud for these. A friend of mine did that, had that done for me. He said, that's really what's down there with you. You can't see a thing. You think you're down there alone picking up teeth, but there's all these other things down there with you. And I do get bumped by animals. I get bumped by sharks. I get bumped by other kind of creatures. But stingrays, there's gators out there. There are sharks. I've had something, I'll be down there and something will, no visibility, and something will just come like that, and it feels like someone just punched me in the chest. And I have no idea what it was, and then it's gone. And I always sit there and wait, is that going to come back? But they never do, or they haven't as of yet. I don't want to jinx myself. Yeah. After the dive, so I'm down there in no visibility. I have this dive light that just gives you a little glow. So if I find a tooth, I'm always holding it up here and looking at it, trying to see if it's whole or broken, or if I find a bone, I don't know what it is, I'm trying to see it, and it's all holding it up here. But when you come up, it's like this blinding sunlight. And so if you see a bigger copy of this picture, everyone always says I look unhappy there. I must not have found anything, but I'm probably just squinting because that light was so bright when you come up. But I always say you never know what finds you'll have or what treasures you get on a dive. These are some of the nicer teeth that I got from one of my dives, or I probably got from that dive. And it's really exciting, even if you just find a few teeth, because I always think, geez, I didn't have those this morning, and now I have them. And like I said, I worked for 20 years in industry as an accountant and in IT. So even when I don't find anything and I'm driving back in on the boat, I go, man, I got to come out in the boat today and not sit at a desk. So I kind of always keep it into perspective. I always say I don't get too excited if I find a lot, and I don't get too disappointed if I don't find anything. You just kind of always try to keep it an even keel. You never know when you'll have the find of a lifetime. This was really cool. This is probably my neatest find. It's a 60-pound Mastodon elephant jawbone. This is a single Mastodon tooth, okay? And it was a single tooth from a Mastodon elephant. They eat leaves and ferns, and so it looks, like a chewing type tooth instead of a grinding tooth, which I'll talk about. But this is like the small tooth there. It's hard to see because the day I found it, a friend of mine was on the boat. He took the picture, but you can't really see it because of the black. But there's two big teeth in there and a big jawbone. It was waterlogged. It was 60 pounds at the time. A lot of people ask how I got it up. I was lucky. It was in the cold weather, so I had a dry suit on. And what a dry suit is, you wear regular clothes, and you wear this full body suit. It has boots in it, and it has a neck and a wrist seal. So it keeps the water out, and you can fill the suit with air. So when I found that tooth, or that jaw, the only way I could have dropped my weight belt, but when I filled my jacket, you have a jacket that you fill with air with diving. You fill the jacket with air so you can come up. I filled the jacket with air, I filled my suit with air, and I was able to come to the surface and carry it. Otherwise, I was dropping the weight belt. And I always say to people, I say, when I was so excited when I found it, I thought, I got to get that up somehow because I'm not going up without it. So I'd maybe still be down there if I didn't have a way to get it up. A lot of times I carry a buoy I can send to the surface. This was on a lot of news stories. I put it on Facebook. A friend of mine's daughter worked for a local news station. They put it on. Then I got calls from, did a little TV show with it and other things. Some of the other things I find, it says sometimes you find things that amazing right away, and other times it takes a while to get the whole picture. These are two more interesting finds because I found them broken in half on separate days. This is a fossilized alligator jaw. It's about that long, and it was from a large alligator. But I just found one half of it, and I thought that was neat. It had teeth in it, and it was this partial alligator jaw. And I set it on my workbench to do something with, and it got covered up by all this other stuff I set on there. And then probably a month later, I found the other one, and I didn't realize it was from the same half. I had forgotten I found the other half. And one day I was cleaning up, and I go, well, that looks a little bit like the other one. And I dug it out and put them together, and they were the same. They were two halves of the same jaw. This one was a real special tooth. I found one half of it one day, and it was 6.8 inches, which was like the second or third largest tooth I ever found. And I'm like, man, I wish I had the other half. So I went back down that spot and I was digging around for that other, never found it. I went home, and I had all these halves in a bucket, and I pulled them all out, and I had the other one at home. You can see that they fit together like a puzzle piece, but they were different colors. And the reason is one must have been trapped under the clay, and one was exposed. And so they had different colors because these fossils are stained by the sediment that they fossilize in or that they lay in. A lot of times there's some rivers I go to, and when the teeth come out of the bank, they're this gray. But as they sit in the clay for a while, like if I find it coming out of the bank, it'll be gray. And then if I find one a little bit down, not 20 feet away that maybe is sitting out a while, they get like this real light color, something similar to this, not quite like this, but similar. So they kind of get lighter as you go. And this was one that, this must have been laying in the clay for a while, and this one must have been right out of the bank. But sometimes you find something and you don't know what it is, or you find something broken, and later you find out that it was something a little bit special. A lot of people ask what it's like to dive for shark teeth. I had this video, but I don't think it's working on this, so that's okay. But if you go on my website, it's megateeth.com, or you can go to savannahfossils.com, and you can go to blog or videos. The Smithsonian Channel did a special where they were talking about the most feared predators of all time, and they sent a crew and they did like a 5-minute video of my dive, not the underwater part so much, but the on the boat and where we go and what we do. Since starting Megateeth Fossils in '99, a lot of articles have been written about my diving. So that's Savannah. You have zero visibility. It's all by feel. It's fun. You never know what you're going to find. And you're down 40 to 60 feet, and you're digging around, and you find these amazing fossils. On average in Savannah, I might find 2 to 3 teeth a day, or a dive. So maybe 4 or 5 teeth a day. And you know, it's pretty exciting. Wilmington's a little different. When you dive off Wilmington, North Carolina, you're diving 40 miles offshore, and you're really close to the intercoastal waterway, and there's some real advantages and disadvantages of diving Wilmington. Advantages, the teeth tend to be larger, and it may be because you're in deeper water and the sharks were bigger. If you look at these, I find in Wilmington you find a lot of teeth this size, okay, a lot more than I do in Savannah. And so this is a large, almost a 6-inch Megalodon tooth. In Savannah, I still find them this large, but not as common. The Savannah teeth tend to be in better condition. They're more serrated, because I said they're trapped in clay, and they're more serrated, the enamel, it's all more complete. Whereas these Wilmington teeth tend to be a little bit more chipped and dinged. So the condition of the teeth in Savannah are better, but you tend to find the larger teeth off of Wilmington on average. In Wilmington, I go out on a charter. I don't have to do my own boat. I don't have to clean the boat. I don't have to put gas in the boat. I just get on the charter boat, and they drive you out. You have large, comfortable charter boats, so that's an advantage of diving in Wilmington. On a calm day, the ride out is beautiful and relaxing. It's real pretty in Savannah when I go diving, but in Wilmington, when you go 40 miles out, and there's sharks, or not sharks, but dolphins, and you know, just you never know what you're going to see in Wilmington. All these fish jumping, so it's fun to go out in Wilmington. Friendly, courteous staff in the dive. You have a friendly, courteous staff. The dive boats, these boat captains are a lot of fun, and they're really nice. You know, they do it every day, and they're always excited, and they always have stories, and they're always there to help you. So, you know, it's more camaraderie when you're diving in Wilmington, because where I dive at home.
Just a question: why do you think that the teeth are larger off the ocean? I mean, if the river.
One of the reasons, I mean, there's a couple reasons. One, I find a lot more of them in Wilmington. When you go out in Wilmington offshore, they're all over the place. So if they probably, because you're out deeper and in warmer water, because you're near the intercoastal, there's probably more food for them, and probably more of them lived out that far. And probably, like a lot of people go and dive in Venice, Florida, and the teeth tend to be a lot smaller in Venice, and they think that it was shallower water back then. It was more of a nursery. The smaller sharks went in, and when they got bigger, they went out to the ocean. So it was probably because it's farther out, it's in warmer water and deeper water, and maybe the bigger sharks live there. And that's probably, you know, as good an answer as any. I don't know if it's true or not.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Friendly, courteous staff. That's an advantage of being out there, though. And very clear water and lots of teeth to find. Like I said, in Savannah, I average 3 teeth a dive. In Wilmington, you'll find 10 or 15 a dive sometimes. I've filled 5-gallon buckets in 3 dives in Wilmington, and I'd never do that in Savannah. It's just amazing. It's so much fun. I always say the most fun I've ever had diving was in Wilmington, diving for these shark teeth. And you can see these are all really big teeth, and that was all from one day. It's just part of what I found in one day. Wilmington. Some disadvantages in North Carolina diving. You're doing 3 deep dives a day at 100 feet, and it's exhausting. You can see this guy kind of fell asleep on his way in. I think at one point his head was on the captain's shoulder, and he was drooling a little bit. So I think they might have thrown him overboard. I'm not sure, but maybe not. Maybe he made it back. But you are really tired and exhausted after doing 300-foot dives. When you go there, you go, you know, like you don't want to drive all the way to Wilmington and dive one day. You want to dive 4 days. So you're there doing this day after day after day, 4 days with 3 deep dives a day. And it just wears you out. You wake up in the morning and you're worn out. And 3 deep dives a day can be dangerous. and you have very long days, about an hour of dive time. So you're out there on the boat. I always say we go out on the boat, we're out there 12 hours diving, but we're only in the water 1 hour. So you know it must be fun if people are willing to drive and go out for 12 hours on a boat and only get to dive for 1 hour. And you see this guy kind of fell asleep on the way in. That's not me, though. I don't have those shoes. I don't think that's me. No, I took the picture. That couldn't be me. High rate of cancellation due to weather. This is the worst thing about diving in Wilmington. You make reservations, you get all excited, and all of a sudden you get there, or you're on your way there, and they call and they say there's wind. If there's wind, we don't dive. The neat thing about diving in Savannah, where I dive, I'm in the rivers. It can be pouring down rain. It could be snowing, which we don't ever get snow, but no matter what the weather is, my boat captain likes to go out. He says if he plans to go out, he wants to go out. He doesn't care if it's raining, he doesn't care what it's doing, and we'll go out, and there's always a spot in the rivers I can dive. So in Savannah, I don't ever cancel dives, but in Wilmington, they're always canceled. Last time I went to Wilmington was about a month ago. We were still going for 4 days. We're all excited. The first day we did good. Got there the morning of the second dive. He's like, well, I hope you find something today because the next 2 days are done. So I'm going for another 5 days at the end of the month. Hopefully I'll get 2 days out of it. That's usually how I look at it. Lower quality of fossils. Another disadvantage of Wilmington. This is a normal Wilmington tooth. This is a normal Savannah tooth. You have more enamel peel, more nicks and dings on the side. They tend to get tumbled around out in the ocean. The Savannah teeth are all trapped in clay. Some of the finds, I've talked a little bit about those. This was the Mastodon Jaw from a TV show I did. A lot of the nicer Savannah fossils, and then that Alligator Jaw. This was a really cool story. I'm in a Rotary Club in Savannah. One day I go into the Rotary meeting, and one of my Rotary members comes up and has this most beautiful Mastodon tooth I've ever seen in my life, and she has this. She says, you know what this is? And I said, yeah, it's a nice Mastodon tooth. And they found it at her dock in the mud, and I couldn't believe it, because usually I don't find fossils any shallower than 40 feet deep in Savannah. And her granddaughter, this little girl here, saw this thing in the mud and pulled it out, and it turned out to be the most perfect Mastodon tooth. And this article's on my website because they did an article in the newspaper and they quoted me in it and that. But this article's on my website, and every time I go to a fossil show, people come up to me and say, is that Mastodon tooth for sale? I want to buy it. And I told them, I said, I've never seen one like it. I've seen hundreds easily of Mastodon teeth. I've never seen one that even comes close to that. Usually the roots are broken, and this one has these pointed roots. I couldn't believe when they brought it to me. I thought they were playing a joke on me. I go,
Did you ask to buy it?
Well, I knew they weren't going to sell it because they found it at their house, and they have way more money than me, so they weren't going to sell it anyhow. If you saw the house, you'd know that they aren't going to, But no, I just told them, I told them they should never sell it, because that's like a family heirloom, really. And it was neat that she got in the newspaper, too. All right, so I appreciate you letting me share my finds. I'm happy to answer any questions you want to ask. Yes?
How do you showed the difference, the shinier ones, and do you clean those at all?
I do clean them. So when I find them, they're all covered in mud. Sometimes things grow on them. Like this one has a piece of coral I left on it, but sometimes they're just covered in stuff. Sometimes you almost can't tell they're a tooth. They get these like real crusty things that grow on them. There's barnacles, just a lot of dirt and mud. And so yeah, I clean them all. And then some of them, a lot of people ask if I polish them. And sometimes, especially with the North Carolina teeth, some of them are so, like this is a normal North Carolina tooth that's, the enamel's gone, it's got no shine to it. And so sometimes on these, people would rather have them shine, so I'll do like a light polish on them. Sometimes you do a real heavy polish on them. So it depends on the tooth. I always clean them. The Savannah teeth need very little cleaning. You get all the mud off and they're real shiny because they were trapped in the clay. But the North Carolina teeth need a lot more work. Yes?
Two questions. One, bumping the sharks.
Yeah.
Down in Wilmington, or
Either one. Because in Savannah I'm diving the Intercoastal Waterway, and the one spot I've been diving like the last 5 years, and I don't want my parents to listen to it because they worry enough, but there's a spot I dive in the Intercoastal Waterway, and the locals call it the shark hole because they used to shark fish in there, or maybe they still do. And this one charter guy would go, "You can't dive in there. It's got big sharks. I've caught tigers in there, and I caught bull sharks." And he'd always say, "Don't dive in there. Don't dive in there." Well, I started finding teeth, and I'm like, "Well, I'll just dive in the winter when these sharks are gone." And after the third year of diving there, it was getting to be spring, and I was going to leave it, and I was finding all these teeth there. And I'm like, one more day, and it's like one more week, and all of a sudden the water was 70 degrees and nothing bothered me. I've done hundreds and hundreds of dives in that spot, and nothing's ever bothered me. And then you go out there and you see like these dolphins swimming around, like they're not worried, and you see birds landing on the water and floating around, and they fly and they land, they float around. And you don't see sharks attacking them. And I'm sure they're down there, and I've gotten bumped by things that you can't see because there's no visibility. But, so far, so good. In Wilmington, it's interesting because you got real good visibility, and you always go down. You never, ever see a shark. And there was one time, I'll remember we did 3 days of diving, and we were on our last dive. So we had done 3, 6, 8 dives. And so, I had done 8 dives. There were 6 of us on the boat, so it's 48 dives we had done, between the group of us. And no one saw a shark. No one thought of looking for sharks. You just don't see any. And right before our last dive, we had, you go down in Wilmington, you're at 100 feet of water, so you got to come up and stay up an hour, and then you go back down. So you got to sit in the boat an hour to decompress or degas, they call it. So anyhow, we're sitting on the boat for this hour, and this one guy pulls out a fishing pole and he throws it out. All of a sudden he gets a fish, and he's fighting this fish in, and this big giant tiger shark swims right under the boat, right towards the thing. So they're out there and they know where you're at. And where we dive, you see all these tagged sharks that are swimming in that area, and you go, well, for every one they tagged, there's probably 2 or 3 that they didn't tag, right? Or 2,000 or 3,000 they didn't tag. So they're out there, and I always kind of justify it by saying, if you were walking down the street and you saw this strange creature that you've never seen before, and it looked really weird, you wouldn't go, oh, I'm going to go catch that and eat it. You'd say, I'm going to stay away from that, especially if it's big. So I always justify myself. Well, if a shark saw me, they go, I don't know what that is, but it looks dangerous. I'm staying away. Maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better. But that's what I tell myself anyhow. So, but yeah, I get bumped all the time by things.
Carry weapons with you?
Yeah, do you?
I got a dive knife, but the dive knife is more just to cut line, like if you get tangled on something. But you could carry like they call them bang sticks that have like a bullet in them, but I'd probably hit myself in the leg with it more than. Like I said, I average about 250 dives a year. I've been doing this since '99, so that's 20 years, and so it's like 5,000 dives in these rivers for shark teeth, and I've never, and like we learned when we learned to dive, 99% of dive accidents are because the diver did something stupid. You don't get attacked by animals usually. You don't. Your gear doesn't malfunction so much. It's usually because you did something you shouldn't have done. And I can name 3 or 4 of, and I wouldn't call them close calls, but things that happened that I don't want to happen. And it was always because I got complacent or I did something wrong. And so you're concerned about dangerous creatures, but you don't. It doesn't kind of, it's like driving on the highway, right? You go, something can happen on the highway, and that there's a lot of accidents on the highway, or not a lot, but there are accidents on the highway, but you do it anyhow, So it's yeah, yes and no.
Like riding a motorcycle.
Oh yeah, that's I would much rather do. And I always say to people, because I used to work at Gulfstream Aerospace, I had a 20-minute ride on 995. And I saw more accidents. And I always say I feel safer down there with sharks. And maybe I shouldn't, but I feel safer diving down there with sharks than I ever did driving on the highway. And that's just how I feel. Any other questions?
So you learned to dive up in this area,
I did.
right? So what's the most awesome thing you ever found up here, as far as fossil or anything like that?
I never found a fossil. My friends found a mammoth skeleton, right?
Yeah.
They found, and I guess I shouldn't say where. So you guys found a mammoth skeleton diving in the local area, a whole thing. And I got to go see it at Gannon. They had it all laid out, and it was really cool. And that was one of the things when I got down to Georgia. I always remembered that when I got down to Georgia and they're finding fossils, like, oh, maybe I'll find a mammoth. But the difference here is that the lakes don't have strong currents, so everything probably stayed in the vicinity, I would guess. Whereas in the rivers, these currents are like, we get a 10-foot tide change every day. It'll go, low to high tide twice a day. And the currents, a lot of days you get down and you overweight yourself and you're just hanging on and it just drags you back. So everything down there gets mixed up. And I'll find a mammoth or mastodon tooth in the same hole as a megalodon tooth. They're from totally different time periods, so everything gets churned around. But fossil-wise, I never really found much up here. We used to dive shipwrecks off Lake Erie, and you'd find little things like china plates, or when I was up here, I never really found anything that I would consider especially valuable. But I found things that were really cool, and I still have a little collection of china and stuff that I found diving up here, even though you're not supposed to take it off the wreck. So,
Do you know off the top of your head how many wrecks? I heard hundreds and hundreds in Lake Erie.
Oh, maybe 1,000 or more, I guess. It's a lot of wrecks. A lot of them are undivable because they've sunk into the mud. But there used to be about 10 wrecks we used to dive regularly that were all within a half hour to 40 minutes of where I kept my boat down at the peninsula. And that was fun. I loved it. And I miss that diving. I do. I miss diving on the wrecks. And when I come home in the summer, every once in a while I get out on a wreck. Actually, my cousin Rick and I dove on a wreck once a few years ago. But yeah. Any other questions? But like I said, I'm happy to show you what I have up here. I'm happy to answer any of the other questions that you have.
What's the middle one?
This is a mammoth elephant tooth. Is that the one you're asking about? This is a mammoth elephant tooth. And I was kind of talking about the mastodon. They look a lot different. Mastodon and mammoths, if you saw pictures of them, you might not know the difference. But the mammoth ate leaves and ferns, and so they had more of a chewing tooth. And so they would pull these leaves and ferns off, branches and eat them. The mastodon ate grass, and so they would actually grind the grass. There's vertical enamel plates on this tooth, and so these vertical enamel plates, it would wear down, so they would grind the grass. So it was just a different diet and a whole different type of animal. But they lived in around the same time period. And I find a lot of these in that spot I called the Shark Hole, and it's between two islands. There's barrier islands. If you go to like Hilton Head or Tybee or even up north of there off of North Carolina and all the Outer Banks, there's all these islands along the coast. And I think the two that are near where I dive used to be one big island, and so I find a lot of mammoth and mastodon teeth between these islands, and it makes me think that was at one point an island.
When you dive and you say it's murky and cloudy and you see things like this, have you brought up like it's just rocks and thought it was something?
Yeah, the thing that's lucky for me, that's a good question, but the thing that's really lucky for me is that in Savannah, there's no natural rock. We don't have any natural rock. Like I don't ever go down and find rocks. So everything that's hard, like even though I can't see it, is usually a bone. And so from that point, I'm kind of feeling, and you get, after thousands of these, you get this where you find a tooth and you can right away know it's a tooth. And there are times, when you're diving for 2 hours with no visibility and warm water, you can almost fall asleep down there. But your mind wanders. And all of a sudden you'll be digging, and you're going along and you're thinking about, what you're going to do later or what you did last night or what you're going to watch on TV. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got a tooth in my hand. I don't even remember picking it up. It's like an instinct thing. And the thing about these, the enamel's so slick, underwater it feels like glass. And I've learned a couple of times I've grabbed a tooth, and I'm like, oh, I got a tooth, I got to pick it up. And I get this real pain, and it's actually a blue crab. Like a blue crab, because their shell feels like the enamel of a tooth. And so you pick it up and it pinches you. And one time I got pinched in the thumb, and I thought whatever it was breaking my thumb. It hurt so bad. And I look, and it was a stone crab, a big stone crab. And it had my thumb, and I grab it, and I'm pulling it off, and then it grabbed my other thumb with its other claw. And I held it up like this, and I could see both sides, and this crab is like this, And I had to bat it away. I finally got it off, but I thought it was breaking my. So now I've learned that whenever I touch something, I keep my hand on it for a second, sees if it moves. If it moves, it's not a tooth, and if it doesn't move, then and then horseshoe crabs. There's big horseshoe crabs. They don't bother you at all. They're down there, but you'll feel the shell, and it'll feel like Any other questions? I know the one question a lot of people ask, and I'll go through this kind of quick. They always say, what was the worst experience you had diving? And probably several years ago I was down, the current was so strong and it was dragging me, and I was in the intercoastal waterway and it was dragging me, and I was trying to crawl into it and it was dragging me back. And usually when I was out there I would tie a line to my anchor line, but that day I didn't do it. I should have. And I'm getting dragged and I'm trying to crawl into it, and finally I said, I give up, I'm going to come up. And I came up and I was way behind my boat, and I didn't realize I was that far back. And the sun had just risen, and I was east of the boat. So my boat captain, looking back, couldn't see me because all he was looking at was in the sun, and on the water it makes this line. And the current was going out, and it just shot me right out into the ocean. And he thought I didn't come up because I always come up, right near the boat. And so he called the Coast Guard, fortunately. And I was out there for about 3 hours floating in the ocean. I just kept getting pushed out farther and farther. I passed all the channel buoys. The Coast Guard finally found me like 3 miles out and 2 miles south of where I started. And I was out there. It was warm, but it was a warm day. It was calm. It was beautiful. And I remember thinking, I couldn't have picked a better day for this. And I did know that, the currents there go out for 6 hours and they come in for 6 hours. So I knew that after a few more hours, the current was going to start coming in and push me back towards shore somewhere. It wouldn't be where I started, but it would be back towards shore. And so I was just very slowly, kicking very slowly, kind of mitigating the current pushing me out, so that when it started pushing me back in, it would push me back towards shore. And then I kept thinking, well, what if something happened to my boat captain? If he, say he had a heart attack or something, and he doesn't, and no one knows he needs help, and no one knows I need help. So, but then after about an hour and a half or an hour, I don't know how long it was because I wasn't looking at the time, but I looked up and I saw these 2 orange helicopters flying around, and I knew they were looking for me. And so I'm like, I felt really embarrassed. It's still embarrassing, but it's a good lesson to know that you'd start. It's like anything, you take things for granted. It works 1,000 times one way, and something can always go wrong. But the helicopters were flying out and coming down, and they were running these patterns, and they were getting closer to me. And I had an inflatable tube. It was about 6 feet long. And when I would see a helicopter, it was kind of going like this, and it would come in and go like that. And so I was waiting, and I'd wave it, And at one point I saw 2 boats go out, and they went way out, and they went off in 2 different directions. And so I was waving a tube at this helicopter, and I look over my shoulder, and the Coast Guard boat was coming right at me. And it was just like in the movies, they see you, but I'm going, hey, hey. And I knew they saw me, but you couldn't help it. And they got me on the boat, and all I could do, I kept apologizing. I go, I'm so sorry you guys had to do this. I know it was my fault. And they were all excited. They go, no, this is great. This never ends good. Usually, we didn't really think we'd really find you, but we had to look for you. And they go, this never ends good. And so and one guy said, he goes, we're more excited than you are. And I said, no, you're not. There's no way. But I tried to give them my shark teeth, and they wouldn't take them. And it was just a lesson. Now I don't ever go out, especially in that area, without tying off the anchor line. And if the current's dragging me, I come right up. I'm a lot more careful. It's always just one of those things you don't think is going to happen. And then when it does, you go, okay, I'm not going to let that go again. Because I know if the Coast Guard got called on me again, they might not come out. They might say, well, if that guy is doing that again, he's on his own. So I make sure I don't do that again. And,
You always dive alone?
You do dive alone. There's no visibility. So if like us 2 were diving together and we were this far apart and I needed help, he wouldn't even know it. And probably what would happen is we just kind of kick each other a lot. So when I go down, I dive alone. That's one thing that you learn when you're diving for shark teeth. And that's why I don't take anyone out diving. People are always calling me and asking if I'll take them diving. And unless I really know them, and I go, when I used to teach scuba diving, I was a dive instructor, you said, don't dive alone, don't dive in strong currents, don't dive in low visibility, and especially don't dive in low visibility if there's dangerous animals around. And so I'm doing like all 4 of those at once. And so you always know if like something happened to someone on your boat and a lawyer got you in court, they'd go, well, when you taught people to dive, did you teach them to dive alone? You go, oh, no. And they'd say, well, why'd you put them in the water alone? You say, well, and they'd say, did you teach them to dive in strong currents? I go, no, you said don't do that. Well, why'd you put them in water in strong currents where they couldn't see? So, I just, I've learned not to take people out. But all the fossil divers I know, whether in North Carolina, because in North Carolina you're stirring up the bottom by digging, and in Savannah there's no visibility anyhow. Everyone dives alone, and that's just, one of the things, that you do. And that's why there's very few dive charters in the rivers.
Well, how about on the west coast, anything out there?
No. They think they were warm water sharks, so most of the Gulf Stream in the East Coast comes up, and it's warm water. On the West Coast, you always hear in California, it's real cold water. Although they have found, they call them New Caledonian teeth, and they found them in these deep, deep trenches in the South Pacific, on our side of the Pacific. And they've dredged these teeth up, but they're real beat up teeth. But and then in Mexico they found some, but those are mostly in land sites. So I haven't really heard, like in California, that they've never found any, and it's probably because of the cold water, is my guess. Everywhere they've ever found these shark teeth, they've been in warm water or warm areas. Like they find them in the middle of the desert in Peru and Chile. They'll see these big hills, and they'll go and there'll be whale skeletons from way back when the deserts were part of the ocean. They find these whale skeletons, and they find shark teeth out there. But it's usually in the warmer areas, or what was warmer.
What kind of skeletons?
What's that?
What kind of skeletons?
Whales.
Whales in the deserts, which you would never expect. But because millions of years ago the water level at one point was higher, and it flooded, what's the coast.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I could do this all day.
The vertebrae you have brought
Yeah.
deteriorate. I mean, they're big
Yeah,
like this.
I don't bring up a lot of vertebrae. They do. They get that big around. They get that big. They're real porous, and there's
They
two.
disintegrate.
Yeah, they do.
But do your other fossils?
Most
do
of
they?
them not. Most
Like
of them
the
not. The
jawbones,
bone.
they don't?
No, the jaw bones are real solid and real dense, and all the shark teeth are real dense. These teeth, the Mastodon fossils, for some reason the vertebrae just are real porous, and they tend to break apart. And in fact, I don't bring them up usually because most of the vertebrae are hollow, and I'll bring them up and they'll be like a little family of crabs or something living in it, and you feel bad about bringing their home up. So I usually just leave all the vertebrae in there because they're not going to last. But they are pretty cool, then you find a big whale vertebrae.
I think they're nice for your garden, but then they deteriorate.
No, you can't do that. Yeah, they fall apart. Yeah, you wanted to plant a whale, didn't you, and kind of grow with it. Any other questions? And like I said, I'm happy to answer questions up here or show you what I have. So. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate the big crowd. Like I said, I enjoyed talking about this, so thank you.